5 o'clock. We should get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fertility from the Men's Side. It's facts, feelings, and firsthand stories about male infertility. And my name is Rob Clyde. I'm a content producer here in Los Angeles, and I'm also the co-host of a video podcast called Talk with Turek, which is about men's fertility and sexual health. A few years ago, I made a movie called If I Could Tell You that was about underground sperm donors, and you can ask me all about that when we're done with this conference. But I'm really excited to talk to our panel of gentlemen here today, and I will be introducing them all. But before we do that, I want to acknowledge our partners, the people that have helped us put this event on tonight. Resolve, the National Infertility Association, is a nonprofit that expands access to equitable family building options through advocacy, support, and public education for anyone facing infertility. The Cade Foundation is a nonprofit that supports families facing infertility by providing education, advocacy, and grants to help make parenthood more accessible. And of course, Worth the Wait. It's an onco-fertility nonprofit that supports adolescents and young adults facing cancer by providing fertility preservation and family building grants, advocacy, and education. So, male infertility. It's common. It's under-discussed. I have my own story. So the reason I'm here isn't just because I'm a podcast host. I had 13 years ago problem getting my wife pregnant, and it was kind of out of nowhere. We already had a boy and didn't seem to have any problem the first time, but here we found ourselves the second time having a problem. My doctors got us right into IVF, and my wife was in her upper 30s and I was almost 40, and they said, let's get to IVF. That didn't work, and it was quite a emotional struggle for us, and we were quickly baptized into this whole world of infertility to the degree that I went and made a movie about it. I wanted to somehow express the emotion of what we were going through, and film was the best way for me. Ironically, maybe not ironically, we were blessed to have our second kid, Kieran, who's 12 now, and it was not through IVF, it was natural. And I actually found out 6 years later when I was getting a vasectomy. My doctor, who was Paul Turek, was inspecting and said, so you only have one vas deferens tube, is that why you and Avery had trouble getting pregnant? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, no, you only have one tube. How many kidneys do you have? And I said, why are you asking? And he said, well, because men with only one vas deferens tube, 70% of them only have one kidney. So he said, how many kidneys do you have? And I said, I have no idea. And I was, 48 years old when I was finding this out. I've since found out that I do have one kidney. It was a birth defect, and that the whole problem of our trying to conceive was probably due to me with a delivery problem, and didn't really have as much to do with my wife at all. And that's when I decided I would take up a little bit of a cause and try to be an advocate for the attention to men through this process. 50% of infertility cases are because of men, and yet at the same time, like I said, it is very under-discussed. And so we wanted to bring a panel of experts and people that have kind of gone through what I went through, which many of you are going through that are watching today. It's National Infertility Awareness Week, so we're here to encourage men's roles in the medical process and how men need to be more involved and get support. This event was created to start addressing these gaps and bringing men into the conversation about fertility care, and these are the guys that are going to help us do it. The first one is Mike Scherer. He is a cancer survivor whose experience with treatment-related infertility shaped his path as a national advocate and co-founder of Worth the Wait, one of our sponsors here tonight. Drawing on his own journey through sperm banking, survivorship, and the emotional complexity of male factor infertility, Mike works to break the silence surrounding men's reproductive health. Hey, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm good.
Absolutely.
That's crazy that you found out you have one kidney that way. That's
I actually, what I didn't say in that is that was happening on Good Morning America. So I was taping, doing a story on vasectomies, and So I found out that I had one kidney on Good Morning America, basically. Crazy.
Wow.
So, Mike, let's jump right into it. And I want you to take some time and tell our audience a little bit about yourself and why you're here and answer the question, what was the more difficult part in your experience, the cancer or the infertility?
Geez, yeah. So, why I'm here, I mean, I think you summed it up with I'm a cancer survivor, and my wife and I, after cancer and after, being successful finally and starting our family, we have a 9-year-old son. What we came to realize was just how much we had to offer people that were going through something similar to what we went through. And, I mean, I think when we started Worth the Wait, it was financial assistance, but what we've realized beyond the financial assistance is, talking about it and making people understand that they're not alone and frankly, educating a lot of people too.
Mhm.
When we talk about the fact that, the treatment that I had, the chemotherapy that I had, and the surgery potentially too, really impacted my ability to become a father. Everyone says, I never even thought about that. Um, so, I mean, real quick background, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer when I was 26. My wife, Megan, who started Worth the Wait with me, we were married at 23. We're high school sweethearts. We've been together forever. So it was interesting because, getting married at 23, we hadn't necessarily talked about starting a family, but we knew we wanted to do that eventually. When we were 26 and I was diagnosed, all of a sudden we had to make all those decisions. And, I think Megan was more ready than I was to make those decisions. So the doctors that I had at the time recommended banking sperm, and I didn't really feel a need to do it. I said I wasn't really interested. I just wanted to treat the cancer. And luckily, Megan sat down and we had a discussion. And next thing you know, I'm banking sperm. I had surgery. I eventually went on to have chemotherapy as well. So it was a pretty long you know journey through cancer. And it was about 2 years after I was all clear from cancer that we felt ready to start a family. And, at that point, there was no guide. There wasn't a lot of help. We were trying, trying, trying. Nothing was working. We started to see doctors. And I mean, the doctors actually diagnosed us with unexplained infertility. Like that's what their diagnosis was. Um, But, to answer your original question, what was harder?
Yeah.
They were different. I say the infertility was harder, and I think it felt harder because when I was going through cancer, I felt like I could protect Megan from that in a way because I internalized, how tired I was and how nauseous I was and that sort of thing. And there was a plan also. When I would go in for treatment, I knew what the doctors were doing. I knew why they were doing it. If something didn't work, I understood the pivot, right? Like if this chemo isn't working, we have these options. With infertility, I couldn't protect Megan from it. I felt like a failure. And, it was just a constant reminder of another thing that cancer took from us when we were pretty young. And, you know, it didn't feel like there was a plan and a guide necessarily. It was more doctors just saying, we're going to get you pregnant. We're going to get you pregnant. Um, Luckily it worked, but hindsight's 2020. We've kind of gone back and said, okay, if we had this to do all over again, here's what we would do. And so now we use that to frame our assistance to other people.
Was your infertility, I mean, like once you went through all the cancer treatment and everything, but you did say you banked sperm, so so the process was through IVF.
Well, so I banked sperm. I did not understand the semen analysis. I was told, my sperm count, and as a guy, I'm like, oh, my sperm count sounds fine, but no doctor sat down and said, actually, no, that's not a high sperm count. We would have banked 7 vials or whatever. And so I think that was step one that was missing. And then we actually had 7 IUIs.
Okay.
And, so we had seven IUIs. We were basically giving up after the sixth IUI, and we used all of my banked and frozen sperm in IUIs 5 and 6, and neither of those worked. The crazy thing is IUI 7 was fresh sperm, and I remember when we went into the IUI, and this was a common theme. The doctor would always say, your sperm count and sample was really bad and it's likely is not going to work. And I mean, doctors would even say, do you want us to go through with this as Megan's like ready to go with the IUI? Um, we did it with the seventh and it worked.
Mm.
So kind of crazy. We actually a couple years later went on to do IVF because the doctors at that time I took a more proactive approach and the doctor said you shouldn't IUI wasn't going to work for you. You need IVF with ICSI, and it didn't work.
Wow.
So yeah.
Was your low sperm count due to the cancer?
So the interesting thing with testicular cancer is, they don't really know. When you have a tumor in your testicle, a lot of times, even before the surgery, like it will affect your sperm count. So, you know, I likely, yes, that's what it was due to. And then, my sperm counts were even worse after all the chemotherapy. The interesting thing with me is, what they will say is sometimes your sperm counts will start to increase the further you are from chemotherapy. Mine were going down and going down quickly.
Mm. All right. Hold right there. I want to introduce everybody to Troy, and then we're going to bring you back for some more questions towards the end. Cool. Everybody, let me introduce you to Troy Adams. He is a former NASCAR Southwest Series driver and one of the few black racers of his era. He's a nationally respected driver development coach and the force behind Troy Adams Coaching, known for shaping young talent and appearing with his family on the Discovery Series Baby Drivers. Troy navigated infertility and experience that deepened his resilience and reshaped how he shows up as a father, a mentor, and an advocate. Thanks for joining us, Troy. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
Um, Give us just a quick background on how you found out you were having trouble with fertility.
My wife and I, we started our journey a little bit later. I was in my early 40s. She's in her late 30s. And I teased her that, as we got older, she had a list of things when, she got married of how her guy was supposed to be. And, we get married and kids and house and all of those things. And, we had, before we even got married, we talked about having kids similar to Mike. We talked about having kids. We talked about, the name of our kid. If we had a boy, what the name would be. And if we had a girl. And we stuck with it. Truly's been an amazing young man. He's now 15 and racing all over the world. But for me, it was probably not as important to have kids than it was my wife, especially at her late age and starting. And, so she did the research. One thing about Kara, when she goes down that rabbit hole of wanting to know something or understand something, there's pretty much nothing in the world that gets in her way. And so she did all the research and went to Kaiser Fontana, saw the doctors there, and come to find out, kind of similar that we needed to figure out kind of what my count was, what she had endometriosis, was having some issues on her side, and so they said, we want to get, we need to get your sperm count. And I always tell the story. This is my story. Maybe it may not be the truth, or her truth, because it definitely is my truth. My sperm count is not low. It's the fact that when we were having intercourse right before ejaculation, she popped up this cup and said, shoot it in the cup. And my stuff went right back up inside of me. It didn't want to go in the cup. And so because of that, my sperm count was low. But the bottom line is we found out it was low count. And we were blessed that, through everything we had truly on the first round. The Cade Foundation was a huge help. They definitely helped financially. And then since then, we've been a partner and worked alongside with them. But uh, our journey was not as hard in regards to our first one. Our second one, or trying to have our second. I have a ton of funny stories on that side, but I think it was a little harder more on the relationship versus the actual act itself, or what we had to do to get Truly. And she's trying to sneak in the background.
That will go down as the best part of this night for sure. Awesome. Do you did you have a stigma? I mean, like, did you feel like, yeah, I'm not going to give my wife what she really wants, and you knew it? Was that where this was this stressful for you?
Um, know that it was stressful in that sense. I tell Kara, I tell all married couples, like I chose my wife. I did not choose my son, right? And so the hard part for me was having at some point, right, in our relationship, having the baby seemed more important than our relationship or me. And I said that was to me probably the biggest strain on my side, for a long time, before, middle, and even after us having Truly, was the simple fact was, again, having our little one. And I tease them to this day. Truly is still her baby at 15 years old, and I work for them. But that was probably the hardest part.
How about in your career? I mean, used to being top of your game, and did it, yeah.
No, because I've done fairly well, at departmentalizing that aspect of it. Most of my athletes at that time were getting a lot of kids that were going into NASCAR. We've been blessed to have 4 in the Cup right now. And because of that, the parents, the families were very supportive, of us having a little one, to giving us all kind of tiki dolls and any other good luck charms that they thought would help. But no, our racing families were extremely supportive, right? I think a lot of it was me on my side, whether that's being selfish or immature, just not understanding, right, on the marriage side of things,
Sure.
and just making sure that we were good. Because again, I chose my wife. I didn't choose to have kids, and to me, that was always important. And to this day, I mean, I still talk with Truly about that as well, right? Till death do us part means a lot to me, and we both, we've gone through a lot in this journey. But that was the most important, was my wife and her health, and what she wanted.
Well, a lot of people that are watching tonight are probably women, and it's common. I mean, the people from Resolve sent us a couple of articles from Cosmopolitan that were just, when men are looking for webinars like this, or groups like that are offered by various REIs and clinics and things, that they don't show up, their wives show up for them, and they're kind of encouraging us. And this is
Yeah.
something that we're trying to alleviate and open the door. So thanks for being here tonight and telling us your story. I want to get to introducing these other 2 guys that are with us, Dr. Peterson and Dr. Lundy, just because their mugs have been there the whole time. We're going to get some information from them, some facts and figures, and ask everybody some questions as well. So let me introduce Dr. Brendan Peterson. He's a professor of marriage and family therapy at Chapman University, whose research focuses on the psychological and relational impact of infertility and how couples cope with the emotional challenges it creates. And Dr. Scott Lundy is joining us. He's the fellowship-trained urologist and surgeon scientist at Cleveland Clinic, specializing in male infertility and microsurgery, advancing evidence-based, patient-centered reproductive care. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to be.
Great. Awesome. I want anything just before we get into questions that you've heard from the three of us that are just you've heard over and over again. Brennan?
Yeah, I think just the overall challenging nature of the experience for men, and what you're saying as well, like that men have a hard time showing up even to the webinars, and how to increase men's involvement. Like when men are recruited for studies, it's really hard to get them to participate, even with a lot of recruitment efforts. And hopefully things like this are gonna start to change that.
Love it. Scott?
Yeah, this is really important to me. This is a lot of what I do, and it's what I'm passionate about. And I think one of the hardest parts is seeing guys struggle and feeling like they have to struggle in silence because society says masculinity is male fertility. And that's just not true. It's a completely different aspect of medicine, and who you are is not your sperm count. And so we do a lot of talking about that. We do a lot of counseling about it. It's important. And to show up and to be there for your spouse and to play your reproductive part sometimes is hard, but if you can get the right team in your corner and the right support network and the right doctors, that's really going to help, and it's going to reveal that you can ultimately be part of the process to remove that stigma. And so I want to thank the three of you who are here with your personal stories, because you're sharing hard things, and that's going to go a long way to help removing the stigma.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to open these questions up to each of you and give me a 1 to 2 minute answer. I'll start with Brennan. Why do you think men feel left out of this fertility conversation?
I think partly they're less likely to go to the doctor, like 2.5 times less likely to go to a physician. They're less likely to rely on like help seeking behaviors. And because that's the case, that environment tends to be more uncomfortable for them. When they are there, there's also a feeling of being like shut out of the conversation because so much of fertility focuses on a woman's body, even when it's male infertility. So sometimes it's a little bit of an interaction between men not showing up and then men really not knowing how they should show up when they are there, how much of a voice they should have in the experience.
Yeah, I will say just that our infertility journey was not our infertility journey. It was my wife's. That she really felt the stress and the pressure, that it was based on her egg count, right? Or her egg count. And she went into the process of no more wine, no more caffeine. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to make sure there is a 0% chance that I haven't done everything I can to get pregnant again. And honestly, I was on the sidelines. Nobody told me that it had anything to do with me. So, I mean, when I got my first sperm analysis to see if we could do IVF, I just had to jerk off in a cup. And that was it. And I handed it to them. I guess I had enough. They just need one sperm. And that was it. And then we only did one round. It didn't work. So we went right on to alternative things. We tried to foster adopt. We did a couple of things. And then sure enough, like I said, just one day we got pregnant. But the point was that I was really distant. I was just there to try to make her feel better. I was just trying to, say it's going to be okay and but I wasn't losing weight. I wasn't, I was smoking a joint every once in a while. I was doing things that weren't 100% optimal, and found out again later that it was on me the whole time. And that a lot of the stress and just ultimate turmoil that my wife and I both went through were unnecessary. So this is why Scott, right? So that's why, Scott, I'm saying, like, what do we need to do to get sperm analyses earlier? What do we need to do to have men conscious of their own fertility until it's a problem?
Yeah, and I just want to kind of emphasize that point. What happens a lot of the time is that this struggle starts, and maybe it's been 3 or 4 months and you're not succeeding. And maybe it's just random luck of the draw, because it's getting pregnant every month is kind of like rolling a dice and you have to get a 6. And so sometimes it just takes a couple of rolls until you do. But if that stress or that anxiety builds up and that physiologic stress builds on your partner and on you, that actually impairs fertility. And then it starts to weigh on you, and you feel like in the bedroom you're trying to have this job once a month to have a child, and then things stop working on the male side too, and you feel sabotaged by your own body. And we don't we don't allow men to feel that way. We don't give them permission to voice that as a society. We don't talk about how common that is, and how, erections tend not to be great during this journey because of this problem. And we certainly don't talk about how if you adopt, or if you pursue other means, or you give up, relieving that stress can sometimes allow a pregnancy to happen. And so it's really all of these things that add up. And there are ways that we can break that cycle, but it really starts with having an honest and open conversation with a provider you trust. It also starts with doing the workup for the male and the female together. And so, we often start this process with the female because she's the one who's driving the ship, so to speak. But if you take 6 months or a year to work up the female side, but you don't get a semen analysis, you're going to sort of kick yourself for not having done that earlier. And then I think even further, even if your semen analysis looks pretty good, there's a lot of value that a provider who's skilled in reproductive urology on the male side can offer about lifestyle, about managing that stress, about erections, about all of these things that come together. And so, the book says it takes a year before we can label you with infertility. I want you to come and see me as soon as you're stressed about it, because I can help.
Love that. And I mentioned early, and I don't know, Brendan, if there is, I don't know, stigma around talking to men about their sexuality or their fertility early. I mean, women go see a special doctor from age 13 on, and it's like a whole focus on just their reproductive system. I mean, how far are we from, do we need that for the young men out there?
Yeah, there's just so much stigma that goes around infertility, and I think Dr. Lundy mentioned it earlier, right? There's this sense of shame, there's this sense of masculinity, how that intersects with that. And it starts at a young age and it goes all the way up into adulthood. So that's one of the things that really makes infertility challenging from the emotional side, is that there's this deep emotional experience, but then there's also like a reluctance to talk about it, reluctance to share about it because of that stigma.
Totally. Troy, do you feel like being a voice in this, coming on a webinar like this, is making a difference to people because you're on it?
100%. First off, I can't believe that your wife let you smoke. So I
I
don't
didn't say
smoke,
she
but I
let
know.
me do anything.
Oh, well, if my wife would have found out smoke, drink, I had, this was not the first, but the second round. I mean, she had me in underwear with ice with snowballs,
Yeah,
cut out the holes in my underwear so my balls would drop down so they'd be cooler.
that's right.
I had to go to what did I have to go to? I went to a acupuncturist to make sure my temperature was okay. So then I had to trick him out. Had to put an ice pack underneath my underwear until I drove for about an hour. I'd get there, and then I understood what temperature my balls you need to be in order to make him think that I was taking all the herbs. Because my wife was, when I say she was a little crazy, she was a little crazy. So, I think all these type of stories, right, help. The first time was a lot easier. The second go around, once, we wanted to have another one, and I was all game for about a month and a half. And then after about a month and a half, uh, it was just, again, the bedroom was no fun. Going to the doctors was no fun. And it was a strain on our relationship. I think that's the one thing that people don't talk about, right? You don't want to have that discussion with your wife, that if it is, and I'm sure it's both sides, where men want to have a child more than the female. But when it is the other side, I think men were there as the protectors, and providers. And so you don't want to tell your queen that you don't want to make love to her, or it's no fun in the bedroom, or you don't like her, because you're trying to, again, she wants to have this child. And that was a hard thing. I mean, I was blessed that I had some friends that I wanted to jump off the deep end multiple times. And one that always stays in my mind, gentleman Gareth Getz, was, I was sitting in front of this acupuncturist. I drove an hour or two with icicles, with an ice pack, you know, under my underwear driving, so I could cool my body down, my testicles down, because that's what he was going to feel in order to see the temperature. You take temperature of. And he said, you know what, Troy, if this means that you have to go through all this so that another man does not raise your child, is it worth it? And I said, hmm. He said, because yes, she may be driving you crazy, but that's still the love of your life. I know your relationship. And you gotta communicate and go through it. Right. And so that conversation helped a lot. And Kara and I were able to have a different conversation. But that is probably the hardest thing, I think, that couples do, is to be able to communicate that when you're going through this very stressful moment. And I think conversations like this, do help.
Yeah, Brennan, speak to that. I mean, I also say that my wife went a little temporarily insane, right? And she knows I say it, but she went to a different degree, and the pressure was on me to try to keep up with her level of insanity. So is that common? Is that a complaint from men? And then I'll ask Mike, you follow up with, when it's on you, are you taking that insanity? Are you taking that on? But hold on that, Dr.
I,
Pierce.
I think men really want to be, I think Troy said it really well. They want to be protectors, and Mike said it as well. I want to be a protector of my partner. And all the research basically shows that men's experience with infertility is moderated through the relationship they have with their spouse and how their wife experiences the infertility. So if it's more challenging for them, for their wife, it's oftentimes more challenging for them. And we know that it can be, a lot of people come in with really strong relationships because they're a team, they're going to get through it together. But over time, it can deteriorate the relationship, put a strain on it, like Troy was saying, depending on some of those factors. So good communication is really important. Finding ways to accept coping differences is really important. Addressing the differences in the sexual relationship is really vital. And addressing things like grief and loss, which are so common in the infertility experience and really aren't talked about a lot. And it can be loss of expectations, it can be lost due to treatment, but there's so much that happens. Partner support is vital, but also like support from other people outside the partner is really vital too, particularly for men. Like depression symptoms and things go down when they are more open and talk about it more with people outside their relationship as well.
Mike, how was it when it was kind of resting on your shoulders there?
Um, I didn't, maybe Megan would think differently. I didn't go insane. I think, and there's another question here that I want to talk about, and that's, expressing your emotions. And I think the thing that made it easier in my situation to express my emotions is we had to go through cancer first,
Mm.
right? So, I mean, cancer, when I first had surgery, the doctor was like, hey, that if that's all you need, that's great. And then all of a sudden I go to chemotherapy. The doctor's like, hey, you had a cancer that's pretty easy to cure, but like now we're dealing with some serious stuff. Like your life is threatened. And we had to become a very strong partnership then. So I was used to expressing my emotions, I guess, as safely as I could at that
Mm.
time, because I mean there was and there still is so much anger there. And there was anger towards cancer and then infertility. I didn't feel like I could express my anger as much as I was having it. Like Megan knew I was angry and she knew. Um, but the only reason I was able to express my emotions is we went through cancer first. And, you know, when infertility is that first big struggle, I think it's somewhat understandable for men specifically to have a very hard time expressing their emotions about this.
Mm.
Um, but no, I didn't go crazy. I did. I mean, there's another question in here about Clomid, and like I actually did take Clomid. I still do take Clomid. I take Clomid for testosterone at this point, not to try and increase sperm counts or anything like that. But I've been on Clomid for years at this point. But I mean, I went to a doctor to get another ultrasound of my one remaining testicle. Um, and I've had plenty of ultrasounds on my testicles at this point, which is, but I didn't try natural stuff. I didn't read the internet. I went to a reproductive urologist and I listened to what he had to say. I cut way back on drinking. I always tried to keep myself in shape. I continued to do that, but I think Dr. Lundy made a really important point, and the stress of it all. Like the interesting thing is when we finished our sixth IUI that didn't work and we used our frozen sperm and we were like, man, we're done. We actually started to really go deep down the adoption path. And so we were like, okay, this is our plan. We knew we were going to make it work in some way. And that took a lot of the stress off of us. And that's when Megan said, I would regret not trying one more time just to try. And that one worked. And I remember I was kind of like, okay, let's try one more time. No expectations, whatever. And it worked. So, I mean, I think that stress is a huge part of, the issue.
Totally. I think there are people too that I used to, when I would present my film or start talking, I would say, hey, just so you know, I'm one of those guys that's about to give you a success story because I have a kid, and all of us here, we're sitting on our kids, right? So it's much easier for us to have this discussion and to have it. And so there might be guys that are watching tonight or that are like, this is all fine and great. I in my movie, I have a line where the woman says, people told me I should adopt, and then I adopted, and then and then I got pregnant,
Yeah.
or I should stop trying so hard to get pregnant and let the stress. Those, and then in the movie she says, I just want to punch him in the effing face, right? Because I don't want to hear your success story. At the same time, they need to hear our success stories. They need to know that we got through them. I think, Scott, how's your mental health practice going? Because I'm guessing that you have to deal with this all the time as well.
One of my favorite parts of my job, if I can see a couple together in particular, I always prefer to see the couples because it gives me a lot of insight into how they're coping. And if I see cracks forming, then I'm going to send them to somebody like Dr. Peterson, and we have people who are excellent. But it also lets me use humor in the situation a little bit. When there's two people in the room and you can make a joke about how, Mike, you've had a lot of ultrasounds, that's nuts. And people crack a joke about it, it can diffuse a little bit. And to me, that's really rewarding because there's a lot of ways to heal. And some of them are medications and some of them are surgical and some of them are being present. And when you do have to have that conversation with the couple who's not going to have a biological child, I will tell you that is the hardest conversation I have in my job. And it weighs on me quite a bit the days that I have to have it. But somebody has to. And it's something that I can do. And it's something that I can grieve with the couples to have. And that willingness to meet them where they're at and to grieve with them, I think, is actually really important. I want to jump back for just a second and talk about these supplements and lifestyle changes, because this is something I hear a lot of. The guys are going to probably enjoy the next 30 seconds. The partners may not. So I apologize in advance. But most of the infertility that we see is not because you had an extra beer. And it's not because you went to the gym one day a week instead of two. It's not your fault. It's not something you're doing. It's something that you were born with, or it's something that happened through bad luck in most cases. Now, there are, exceptions. Like if you're smoking a joint every day, we don't love that. We don't mind one once in a while, honestly. From a medical perspective, that has been shown not to be a deal breaker. We don't mind a drink from now and again either. We like one drink twice or three times a week instead of three drinks in one night. So you see these guys come in and they're on the water diet, right? They're eating like, toast and water, and they think that's going to help. And paradoxically, it may not. And exercise, even like the ultra marathoners or the people who are, really extreme athletes, often have worse fertility than the guys who, hop on a bike once a month. So it's in moderation, and there are ways to improve this and to optimize it, but it's not all on you. And you just have to know that.
Man, that's awesome. Thank you for mentioning that. I also want to mention that Resolve has free support groups for women and specific ones for men and couples and groups. And 85% of people who attend these support groups just feel like they're more in control of their journey. And so definitely join a support group, find people, just start talking about it. I know it might feel embarrassing at the beginning, but I think you'll find that you have some brothers out there that are dealing with the same thing. I'm going to move on to another question. Dr. Lundy, are there any clinical trials for male factor infertility right now that guys should know about?
There are a number of cutting edge approaches that are being investigated. I think one of the really frustrating parts of our job is that we have a very small toolbox to help guys with male factor infertility. We can provide some lifestyle changes. We can offer some medications in some cases. There are surgeries that we can do in rare cases. We can send them to IVF or IUI. And so we're always looking for more. And there are iterations of some of those. There's a question here about microtesting we'll get to, and there are some novel approaches to how to do that coming down the pipeline. There's some medications that are potentially going to be on the horizon. There's a couple of medications that are being used by someone you mentioned, actually, Paul Turek, who's a colleague of mine. I just saw him 2 days ago, for stimulating spermatogenesis for some guys. So there are things coming down the pipeline, but overall, the amount of research in our field far lags behind cancer, for example. And the hope is that with more emphasis on infertility and more funding and more support, we can do a better job with the science.
Yeah, I mean, IVF is only 43, 44 years old in America anyway. So it's like they're figuring it out as they go,
Well,
Go ahead.
wow. So one of the things, I want to touch base a little bit back on in one of the things, statements, in the chats when it talks about stress does not cause, infertility. And I totally agree. But I will say that I've had quite a few friends that are in the racing. That's why my wife bought me the snowballs and cut all the holes in my underwear, is because she was told, right, that they need to be cooler. But I don't believe stress does. But when you no longer have fun with your partner, and when the journey becomes that much more of the task, I always would tell her, what good would it be that we have a child and we have no relationship?
Mm.
And so we have to have that balance. And I don't think sometimes we don't talk about that, enough. Yes, blessed that we all had a little one, right? And I don't even know how that feels to not have one. But what I will say is a lot of work to me needs to also focus on the relationship, because again, that is the one thing in our relationship and the individuals that I've talked to, that there's been more strain and long lasting pain on the relationship side, even after they had the child, because of what they had to go through to have the child.
Totally. Dr. Peterson, when should men seek help?
I think they should seek it out as early as possible, but it's never too late to do it. I think one of the biggest myths about infertility or for men that's been dispelled is that they don't have like strong emotional reactions. And that for a long time, that was the myth, was just that men don't really, I mean, they're going to be upset, but not as much as their partners. And we've learned that men have very complex emotional reactions to infertility. There's depression levels go up, anxiety can go up, grief and loss, like we've mentioned, low self-esteem, guilt. all of that can be really powerful. And shame and stigma, when it interacts with culture, it produces this sense of like emotional suppression and secrecy and shame. And when all that goes together, men just it creates this self-fulfilling prophecy of kind of moving and avoiding things. And so they don't seek any help. And then they think, and then it builds and builds and builds. And they're like, well, what's the point now? It's too big. So it's breaking those things down by just like small ways, like talking about it. People have mentioned being open about it is such a powerful way to handle it, whether it's finding a trusted friend that they can talk to, even journaling with expressive writing if they don't want to talk to other people, online discussion boards if they don't want to be face to face. Those can all be really powerful ways to kind of seek support from people and find ways to get help.
Love it. Scott, let me ask you just from the Q&As here, I want you to answer the Clomid question.
Sure. So we like Clomid. It's a good medication. So there are two categories of medications we use to help men with low counts for an unexplained reason. One is Clomid, and another is a medicine that's best exampled by anastrozole, which works in a different way. But Clomid is kind of like putting the foot on the testicle gas pedal. It sends a stronger signal to make the testicle more efficient. And it's right for some men. And about 40 to 50% of men who start it have a clinically significant improvement in their counts. Anastrozole is a bit like taking your foot off the brake, where you're removing that estrogen that's causing the negative signal to go to your testicle to slow down. They both work well, and anastrozole has about the same 40 to 50% chance of clinically helping. They do both have a small chance of making things worse. And you have to know that. You also have to watch for side effects like flushing or headaches or mood changes. These are rare, but we need to know about them. And so, yeah, we use Clomid and anastrozole all the time, and I very much believe in them for the right patient.
While we're on you, is there any other just things that men aren't doing that would boost their fertility?
Yeah, as far as medications or supplements goes, one of the most common things we're seeing now is that men are on testosterone and they're told that that won't affect their fertility, and it does. Like profoundly affects their fertility. And so you need to be cautious in an absolutely negative way. Yeah. And they'll come to us with no sperm because they were started on testosterone and no one ever told them. So that's an important question that you need to address if that's part of your journey. There aren't many supplements that have strong data behind them. For a while, we were very enthusiastic about antioxidants, but the picture has changed a little bit. And we now know that most men probably won't benefit from them through some high quality data that we've collected. There are exceptions, but by and large, I think taking supplements is not going to harm. It's a way for you to feel like you're giving back or you're at least trying to contribute. But at the end of the day, there aren't a lot of really great supplement-based approaches that have strong data behind them.
Yeah. I've heard from people like yourself and Dr. Turek that our fertility is actually a biomarker for our health, right? Yep. And so the first thing I would say to men is, like you don't have, and you said this, you can have a drink every once in a while, or you can, whatever some of those vices are that will help a little bit with the stress. But you need to get healthy. So when I was going through this problem too, I weighed over 300 pounds. And I was just a picture of unhealth at the time. And I'm looking saying, I don't know, my wife can't get pregnant. So I think to the guys out there, it's not, yes, there's some complicated issues that, people like Mike have gone through and that Scott sees all the time. But I'm sure the first thing they're going to say is eat right and exercise and just start to, get yourself in there, that your fertility is actually might be sharing something that's more wrong with you than can't get your wife pregnant. Mike, is there anything that comes with your nonprofit worth the wait and some stories or anything that you just need to share or something that you see all the time with? Do you help guys like have gone through what you've gone through? Is that kind of the issue?
Oh yeah. I mean, we help young adult cancer survivors, and we help them, at different phases. So we help with fertility preservation before before treatment for men and women. And then we also do family building grants. So, you're in survivorship. What do you want to do? Or do you need a surrogate, in vitro, IVF, IUI, adoption? So, I mean, I think the interesting thing that we've started to do now is we actually have helped create a tool and participate in a tool that helps adolescent boys have an easier time making the decision of banking sperm when they're diagnosed with cancer. And typically they're in a room with their family, their parents. They don't talk about this stuff, and all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, you need to do this." And how awkward is that for a 15-year-old kid, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, let's be real, it's awkward at any age. But you know, uh, the thing through Worth the Wait that we have tried to emphasize for people is there is a way. We don't necessarily know what that way is today. And that's why we say worth the wait, right?
Awesome. Yeah.
There is a way. And I think the next question is, and this is, big to Troy's point, like, how far are you willing to go for that way? And, I've actually talked with doctors, reproductive endocrinologists in the past, and I kind of said, like, you guys need to be looking at this more like boxing trainers. Like, a boxing trainer's job isn't to just throw their boxer out there and let him get punched in the head a whole bunch of times. A boxing trainer's job is also to know when to wave the white flag. And, you need to check in with these couples, and you need to say, like, how strong is your relationship? How much are you willing to endure? How much have you endured already? Because to Troy's point, I mean, it's get ready to test that relationship once that kid comes, right?
Yeah,
Like,
we haven't even mentioned the cost of all
right.
this, right? So we don't have insurance coverage for it. We can't afford the treatment. Oh, we're going to do one more. We're going to do one more. I mean, costs a lot to do this too,
Right.
right? Um, yeah. So again, lots of great organizations that are
And
there. I love your thing of we don't know how, but we're gonna get it done.
right. And so, I know, like, we've already touched on this, the whole, like, stress and infertility. And right, I mean, clearly my infertility was not caused by stress. But what I can say is stress did not help it.
Right.
And that's what, especially with the couples and the patients that we're working with, we're trying to help them cope.
Mm,
And sometimes coping with stress is a very powerful thing. It's not going to cure anything, but I do think mindset is important, because mindset helped me in cancer, mindset helped me in infertility, and mindset helps me on a daily basis now in survivorship, because believe me, there are side effects that I'm dealing with every single day that are a result of the treatment that saved my life.
mm. Awesome. I want to ask one more question before we start to wrap things up here. And this was a big one for my wife and I on her side, and that was my doctor just said my only option is donor sperm. So now we're in a whole different ballgame emotionally, Brennan. This is existential stuff here that I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
ready to deal with. How do I deal with that?
This is honestly for men, this is one of the most challenging things to deal with because it takes away that possibility of a biological link to the child. And they have to ask themselves those questions. What does fatherhood really mean to me? What does parenthood really mean to me? Is that necessary? They have to really go through and challenge some of those core assumptions they've had about themselves and their futures and their lives. And then to think about things like privacy versus secrecy and disclosure. Those are big issues about if I do decide to go down that road, who do we tell? Do we tell close family? Do we tell our wider network of friends? And then the disclosure issue with the children down the road, or with the child or with kids, about, like, what do you tell them about that? Because there's a lot of evidence that shows that it's good to tell them earlier, which is a shift when some people would do it for years and not even ever disclose. But with 23andMe now, like, that's a people are going to find out, right? So that's a big thing where we're keeping it a secret really isn't an option much anymore, and it's really disruptive to the child's development later in life. So these are all the big existential questions that people have to address. It's a huge challenge.
Dr. Lundy, some last minute words?
Yeah, I think that in particular is a very challenging conversation to have. When you first invoke the idea of a donor gamete or of adoption, there's often this like knee-jerk reaction. And we've seen this. And then we also see the success stories where a couple makes that leap to pursuing those and then contacts us later down the road and is incredibly happy with their decision to do so. It's a journey, and every couple takes that journey in a different time frame and stops at different points along that journey, and that's all okay. And my job is really just to provide the information as best as I can, framed for that couple, and whatever they choose or however they navigate it is their choice, and I fully support it. But it has to be personalized. And if it's not personalized, then I would say the provider is not doing a great job relaying the information.
Yeah. Troy, any last words?
Yeah, I go a little bit back with Mike, and I'm big on relationship, right? First and foremost, so I want to thank Cade Foundation. Truly, I keep saying that because my son's name, but we were blessed, right? We were blessed because they welcomed us with open arms. They helped us, with the grant, and alongside of that, we came back and did a fundraiser as well. But I always say my son's name is Truly. He's a K baby, right? And last week, uh, there's a few accomplishments that he just did that we were able to kind of sing from the mountaintops. One, he was the first American to be on the French F4 racing deal in France. And then he went to NOLA and was on Fox 8. And people always like, you know, are you amazed that your son is racing cars and doing all these things? And I always have to remind them, no, I'm just amazed that he's here.
Mm.
And I also have to thank my crazy wife. As much as she's crazy, I love her, because without her craziness, he wouldn't be here. And so for those couples who are going through the process, as Mike shared, it's going to test your relationship. It's going to test it. Praise God. And Mike, went through cancer and is beating it. Kara went through a cancer journey as well. And to me, it was just as hard. But I think we go through these situations to test our relationship as a married couple. And it just depends on how bad you want it. But you need to continue to check in with each other, and make sure that you continue to stay on the same common goal. Right. And I believe if you stay on the same common goal, then you achieve the unthinkable at that time. But for a community, we just need to continue to kind of share that it's not an easy journey. It's a tough one, but in the end, and I'm blessed that we had a child. And so in the end, it's definitely all worth it, whether it's through, again, all the different methods. We were close to going through adoption. That's a whole nother story. Uh, but you have to stick with it. You have to stick with the plan, and it is tough, but at the end, it's worth it.
Yeah, I want to just reemphasize the dedication to each other, because, this journey could have a happy ending. We're sitting here saying we have a happy ending. The journey could not have a happy ending, and
Yeah.
doesn't, for a lot of people, a lot of men. And we need to be dedicated to our partners, because in the end, that's who we do have, and I'm sure that Brennan deals with lots of couples that aren't successful and trying to keep them going. We're running out of time here, guys. So before we go, I just want to give some information away so people know who to follow up with. Remember that male fertility matters. You're not alone out there. Help exists through people like Worth the Wait resources. So www.worththewaitcharity.com, and you can find them on Instagram at Worth the Wait Charity. Then, of course, Cade Foundation. The resources are at www.cadefoundation.org, and on Instagram at Cade Foundation. And of course, Resolve. Their support can be found at www.resolve.org. and at Instagram at resolve.org. Brennan, Scott, do you have anything, any email address or a website you can plug?
I think you've already. Oh, go ahead, Brennan. Yeah.
I just have an email. I mean, just bpeterson@chapman.edu, and people can reach out anytime.
Scott?
Yeah, I think you've plugged really important ones. We love Worth the Wait. We love Cade. Cleveland Clinic has a lot of resources on this too. You can check out their website, and there's a number of us providers, and we do webinars as well. And then, find somebody local you trust. And SSMR is a great society that highlights all the male factor reproductive urologists that are fellowship trained at Sexual Society for the Study of Male Reproduction. And they have a good list so you can find somebody in your area.
Great. And let me go ahead and plug that I host a podcast on this issue. It's called Talk with Turek with Dr. Paul Turek, who's also a reproductive urologist. And we do a show about once a month, and you can find us at Talk with Turek on YouTube and Instagram.
And there is, sorry, real quick, I want to address this question. It's what advice do you have for a guy that's been advocating for the male voice for the last 5 years, but haven't seen any success? When you're dealing with a huge problem, you have to break it into smaller pieces. And I would say if you feel like you haven't had any success with your advocacy, break that advocacy down into smaller pieces and see if you've had success with that. So I would say if you have one person that you've talked with that has, gone through this journey and felt better from leaning on you, felt like they could be more open with their relationship. I mean, just one person, if you've profoundly changed their life by being an advocate, you have seen success. And so use that to keep going. And I mean, that's what we really did with Worth the Wait. It was really small successes. We gave our first grant. Next thing you know, we gave 5 grants in 1 year. Next thing you know, we were celebrating 50 grants. It starts small, but once you start to see that success, it's a waterfall effect. So keep going. This community needs you to keep going.
And brother, Brennan, Mike, Scott, Troy, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to all the people that have joined us today, stuck in there, asked the questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them. Let's do this again. I look forward to meeting you all in person sometime soon.
Likewise.
Sounds good.
Likewise.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Sure.